Hey everyone, Mr. MC here. This is guide for round 2 of the 2021 FIA Nations Cup season stage 2 taking place at Lago Maggiore East Reverse with the Gr.4 cars. So let's get this started by mentioning that I'm using the Renault Megane trophy, keyword trophy, as this car is very agile and it's good on feel and tire wear. Brake balance is mentioned on the left side of the screen, but let's go ahead and get started with the first braking point by braking just past the white line that goes through the regular course. So you want to brake just after that line, brake hard for a short while, and just gradually ease off of the brakes and gradually apply a throttle, as you want to make sure that you don't get any wheel spin as you're exiting the turn. Take this left and right turn flat out, but this is where it starts to get pretty difficult. So sector 2 is where all your time is hanging out at. So you want to bring yourself towards the left, and you want to start to use a little bit of braking just before you reach this line that goes across the track. Take advantage of the white curb on the right and do lots of braking and throttle control, taking full advantage of the red and white curbs. And just before you reach the yellow area that is on the left, you want to use a bit more braking, bring yourself into the red and white curves, and do some throttle control so you can get a nice clean exit and try your best to not touch the grass. Then bring yourself towards the right, and you want to brake just before the curb on the left ends, and you want to do a little bit of braking control, so gradually ease on the brakes. Go out full braking for a very short moment and then ease off of the brakes. Carefully ease on the throttle, and you want to get the timing right, because if you time the acceleration too early, then you risk hitting the grass. Stay on the right side of the track and brake just after the red area on the right starts. So you'll brake right around here before the 50-meter board, brake hard for a short moment, and ease off of the brakes, taking advantage of the red and white curbs. Try to take this right turn flat out, but do a little lift if you need a bit more rotation, and then brake just after this curb on the left ends. And you want to make sure that you take advantage of the yellow area and do a little bit of throttle control to make sure that the car can rotate through the final turn. But that is pretty much it for the lap guide. Let's go ahead and take a look at the strategies. For the qualifying session, you only have 5 minutes to try to get a good qualifying time, which will give you 3 chances to try to get a perfect qualifying time. And because this track is short, you will see some people do what I call the jump out and jump back in strategy, which I'll mention later on in this section. So assuming that you're using cars that are good on tires like the Renault Megane trophy and the Alfa Romeo 4C, tire wear shouldn't be an issue for the qualifying session. But Slipstream is going to be incredibly useful. So with these Gr.4 cars, they are slower, which means that they'll benefit more from the Slipstream. So if you do decide to take part in the Slipstream qualifying, you want to be within 3/4 of a second between yourself and the next car. So for example, right now I'm right around that 3/4 of a second range between myself and PXL and Lamb, so I should be getting some of the benefits, although it seems like I'm actually just out of it now. Also, make sure you nail down this second sector, which is where we're going through. It starts just after the bridge and ends on the smaller back straight. This second sector, this is where all of your time is, and it pretty much comes down to how confident you are in taking those turns. The more confident you are in taking those turns, especially at higher speeds, while making sure that you're able to keep the car under control, then you'll be able to get better lap times. And that's actually going to be where it can be bad to be under someone's Slipstream, because let's say you're going for a Slipstream qualifying, but the car ahead of you isn't as confident in the second sector. They slow down quite a bit, and before you know it, you'll end up right behind them. You'll have to slow yourself down so you don't end up hitting them, and also be careful with that final turn. And if you have to slow yourself down to not hit anyone, then you're only going to risk losing time. So in the higher splits or the higher level lobbies, Slipstream qualifying is definitely going to be a thing, but in the lower level lobbies, definitely qualify by yourself, especially because people will be taking Sector 2 pretty differently. And this is the jump out and jump back in strategy. So let's say you finish a lap or you messed up somewhere along the way, press options, exit, and in the lobbies you press enter course. During the FIA race day itself, the button will be replaced by one called qualifying, so you just press that. You'll spawn back at the pit box with a new set of racing medium tires, so you don't have to go through the pit stop sequence and all that stuff. So you pretty much skip all that shenanigans and you're pretty much going back out trying to get a outlap done before the timer hits 0, and then you can do another qualifying lap. And at the end of the day, you'll get 2 to 3 chances to try to get a good qualifying time. But anyways, move on over to the race strategies. We are doing 23 laps at Lago Maggiore East in reverse with the Group 4 cars. And I don't know what happened with that car. He decided to exit stage left. But anyways, we're doing this with the Group 4 cars. Fuel is a ×5, so fuel is a big issue too, where you have to refuel. Tire wear is a ×8, so tire wear is obviously an issue. We have the racing medium and hard tires provided, and both tires are required, so you do want to use both tire compounds so you don't get a 1-minute penalty after the race ends. And just a quick note, you might see that I'm starting on the racing hard tires. I noticed that the first 2 cars, or at least one of them before they disappeared, they were also starting on the racing hard tires, so I kind of wanted to copy their strategy for this race. But generally speaking, the tires that you want to start on will depend on where you qualify. So if you're qualifying in the very front, you can start on the racing medium tires and just try to get away from everyone else and build that gap early on. But if you're qualifying closer towards the middle or the back of the pack, start on the racing hard tires to get the sour tire compound out of the way so that you spend the second half of the race on the faster medium tire compound. And the racing medium tires, they will last you around 10 to 12 laps, so you're pretty much going to be pitting around the halfway point of the race. So assuming that you started on the racing medium tires, you'll see people starting to pit as early as lap 10 or even lap 9, or people will be pitting as late as lap 12. And depending on which car you're on, let's say you're in the Megane Trophy, tire wear slowly starts to kick in at around lap 6 to 7, but because of how much fuel is being depleted throughout the race, the tire wear won't be so bad. It'll be a bit more of a gradual thing, so you'll have plenty of time to adjust your driving style so that you can try to make those racing medium tires last as long as possible. Also, brake balance, I do need to mention that for the Megane Trophy, the front tires wear out faster than the rear tires, so you want to brake balance towards the rear of the car. If you're on the racing medium tires, bring the brake balance to +2 or 2 to the rear. And this is so you can get the car to whip around the turns and to save the front tires. But once you're on the racing hard tires, you can go for a bit more braking efficiency and move the brake balance to +1 or 1 to the rear. And if you're in the Alfa Romeo 4C, move the brake balance towards the front of the car, so you're going for around -2 or -3, which is towards the front of the car. But while tire wear is a problem, it's not as big of a problem as the fuel issue, because fuel, oh boy, you do have to refuel. So because fuel is also an issue, this is where the Megane Trophy and the 4C come into play as being some of the better cars when it comes to fuel efficiency. And generally speaking, when it comes to where you want to short shift in the Megane Trophy, you pretty much want to shift when the bar on the bottom of the screen is at around 75% full. However, do try to take advantage of the Slipstream because it's going to help you out a lot. So whenever you're within 3/4 of a second between yourself and the next car, you'll be in the Slipstream range. you'll get a nice free tow, your car will accelerate faster, reach higher top speeds, and you'll be using a bit less fuel. So you can even stack that up with doing a bit more short shifting and save even more fuel along the way. However, with the Alfa Romeo 4C, because the acceleration on the 4C is not as good as the Megane Trophy, it's going to be harder to do the fuel saving. So pretty much the only time that you really want to do any sort of fuel saving in the 4C is when you're literally right behind someone, like how I am right now, or was right now, which is going to be one big disadvantage about the 4C, and it's going to make this race a bit more of a Megane Trophy one-make race. And let's go ahead and actually take a look at the pit stop. So the pit stop, it is hanging out on the right side just after the very last turn. Very easy to miss, so you want to know where it's hanging out at. And I started on the racing hard tires because I'm doing a wacky strategy, and the car in second place, he is on the racing medium tires. Also, when you're going to refuel, if you see this little diamond, that's where you want to stop refueling, because this is where the game's saying this amount will let you finish the race, assuming that you keep up with the current driving style. So because I'm doing all the fuel saving, I don't have to fuel as much as the car in third place, or second place, I'm sorry. And yeah, I'm going to not refuel as much, but I still have to keep up with the fuel saving by the short shifting, because if I start to push it, then I'm going to run out of fuel. And yeah, fuel saving is going to be a pretty big thing, because when we entered the pit stops, I was right behind the car that is now in third place, but now I did all the fuel saving, I refueled less, so I was out of the pit stop sooner, and now I am 2 seconds ahead of the car that I was with. And once again, I'm going to show another example of why fuel saving is going to be a pretty big thing for this race. So the car in first place, he just went into the pit stops. I don't think he fuel saved at all, so we're going to see if we're going to be able to pass him as he exits the pit stop. So once again, he's on the wacky strategy with me, where we started on the worst tire compound, so he's going to be switching over to the racing medium tires, and we passed the pit stops and he's not out of the pit stops yet. So we definitely got a good pass on him without even having to literally pass him, and he's pretty much going to exit about 8 seconds behind me. So fuel saving is a big thing. You definitely want to try to take advantage of it. And don't forget that before I pitted, he was about 2 seconds ahead of me, and now he was 8 seconds behind. So this race is pretty much a one-stop race where you pit halfway into the race before you... Oh my god. Anyways, so I got disconnected like many times, and making this guy was really frustrating. But anyways, so pit halfway into the race, so anywhere from laps 10 to 13, depending on the tire you're starting on, to switch over to the tires that you haven't used yet and to refuel. Fuel saving is a really big thing for this race, so shift at around 75% if you're in the Megane Trophy. And definitely take advantage of the Slipstream to get a free tow and to save even more fuel. So after all the disconnection shenanigans, because my internet has been extremely poor lately, in the custom race I was able to get a 33 minutes and 7 seconds. So this is a bit of a long race, a bit of a miserable one, just because you have to deal with Sector 2, and Sector 2 is not fun at all. Now I do want to mention about the Alfa Romeo 4C, because I think while this car is good, the Megane Trophy is better than the 4C in a couple ways. So we're in the perspective of PX7 Lamb. He's using the Alfa Romeo 4C, and basically there are a couple problems with the 4C. While the 4C is a bit better when it comes to fuel versus the Megane Trophy, this car is difficult to drive. It's a pretty twitchy car where the rear end likes to whip out a lot, so if you're not too careful with how you're driving the 4C, especially through sector 2, then the 4C is going to start to slide around and you risk spinning out. So you really need to know how to drive the 4C if you want to actually use this car for the race, because sector 2 by itself, it really makes the 4C want to lose control. And also there's the acceleration problem. Its acceleration is not as good as the Megane trophy, so you do risk getting swallowed up by other Megane trophies if you do decide to use the Alfa Romeo 4C. So you pretty much need to be under the slipstream at all times to be able to keep up, especially with the acceleration out of the lower speed turns. And then there's also the issue about the tire wear. For the 4C, the rear tires wear out faster than the front tires, so once the rear tires start to wear out, then the 4C becomes even more problematic to drive. So on paper, the 4C and the Megane trophy are the best cars for this race, but if you're using the 4C, you better know how to drive it, because this car can become unforgiving, especially in sector 2, if you don't know how to drive it. Pretty much the Renault Megane trophy is going to be the better car to use, as it is much more stable than the 4C. It has really good acceleration, and because of its better acceleration, you can get away with a bit of fuel saving, especially when you're under someone's slipstream. But anyways, let's move on over to places to overtake and the penalty serving zone. So this track is going to be a bit difficult to get any sort of overtaking done. So your places to get an overtake done, it's going to be pretty limited. For example, the main straight is pretty much the best place to try to get the overtake done, especially with the use of slipstream. After that, it's going to be difficult to get an overtake done, especially as you go through the second sector. So it's pretty much going to be single file line through here, because if you try to battle it out throughout this second sector starting now, then you're going to end up losing a lot of time, and with how narrow things get, you can potentially end up in an incident. And it's still single file line, but do be aware that people can potentially go for a dive bomb coming into this long left turn before sector 2 ends. Here is also the only penalty serving zone at Lago Maggiore Eastern Reverse. So if you have a penalty to serve, you'll be serving it here. And this is pretty much the last best place to get an overtake done, because after that, it's pretty much single file line again. But do be careful, because in the final 2 turns, so this hairpin and the final turn itself, it could be possible for some people to get a little dive B, so just be aware of that. But anyways, that is pretty much it from me. Hopefully your guys' race goes well if you decide to participate in this race. But that's all from me. I'm going to sign off now. So this is Mr. MCA. Wish you a good race, and I'll see you in the next video.